Why don't people realize that they're the dominant narrative? Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and there's this massive thing that happens in culture that has bugged me ever since I became aware of culture in a broad context. And while often I attempt to give explanations as to why things are the way that they are, in this case, I don't really have the answer. So I'll just pose the question. Why is it that people who are perpetuating the dominant cultural narrative are usually unaware that they themselves are the dominant cultural narrative? More so, why is it that they more than often seem to think that the dominant cultural narrative is something completely different and that they are the ones that are telling it like it is? I noticed this the most with the left in the current year, but it has been true in the past with right leaning people, and it will undoubtedly be true again in a few years. I remember this same type of BS coming from Bush supporters during the Bush years, but I'll back up quite a bit. When I was a kid of maybe 10 years old, I was the first kid in my class that started listening to the alternative rock station, as opposed to the pop, R&B, and hip hop station or the oldies station, as we still listened to the radio a lot back then. Now, granted, at age 10 or 11, the other kids in my class didn't feign any effort towards pretending that they were any sort of rebel. So, not surprisingly, I was mocked and belittled for deviating from the herd, even though I can assume most of the kids had never really given the radio station I listened to a chance. However, of course, by the time I was in the 8th grade or so, and well into early high school, growing up in Seattle, a huge percentage of my peers were listening to the alternative rock station that I had been listening to, which I was already starting to get sick of. I used to like bands like Nirvana, early REM, and earlier Smashing Pumpkins, but by the time the greater portion of my peers were listening to that radio station, they were raving about how much they loved bands like The Offspring, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, by the time Dave Navarro was in the band, and the Presidents of the United States of America, all of which irritated me. What was weird about all of this was not simply that all of the conformist kids were now listening to the quote unquote alternative rock station, which was completely mainstream by the mid to late 90s, but further than that, they seemed legitimately convinced that they were being rebellious, and I can assume they mocked preps and cheerleaders right on script. And then, of course, I got into underground electronic music, which wasn't being played on the radio basically at all at the time, and kids thought that I was weird for dressing like a raver. But eventually, by senior year, a sizable portion of the kids in my class started going to raves too, as if they all secretly thought I was really cool the whole time anyway, which some of them actually confessed to eventually. Flash forward to today, this very moment, and I see the same exact thing happening all over social media. In the wake of the Vegas shooting, which was committed by a white man, there is already a completely expected avalanche of articles published that all basically say the same exact thing. This is what came up when I did a Google search for the white privilege of the Vegas shooter. And I can assume there are countless other results that would show up if I were to continue scrolling down and going through the pages. And what's the ironic thing? Well, despite the fact that they all have at least a significant element in them where they are painting out white men to be the most commonly violent people in America, or in all of history, or the types of people who commit the most mass shootings, or whatever negative thing they say about white men, despite the fact that they all say the same thing, and everybody that has been paying attention to media at all for the past 5 years knows that there has been a relentless onslaught of white male bashing that is completely mainstream in well over 90% of outlets, Well, despite the fact that this white male as villains depiction is clearly the dominant cultural narrative in the United States, these people all still have the audacity to say exactly what isn't true and claim that Islamists are constantly demonized, while white men allegedly get away scot-free. Meanwhile, we all know about the relentless apologetics that people make for Islamic terror. That is, assuming it's even reported upon anymore, which it often isn't, unless a bunch of people died. But even still, what happens when many people do die at the hands of an Islamic terrorist? When the Orlando shooting happened and the guy called 911 and explicitly pledged allegiance to the Islamic State, called the Boston bomber his brother or whatever, and went on and on, media did everything they could to basically pretend like that phone call didn't even happen, and they spread rumors that he was just a closet case. It took me about a year to even hear the audio of the 911 call. Have you heard it? Matt Christensen played it in a video of his, and it's absolutely crazy. Once you hear it, even if you had never questioned any of this stuff, it will make you question everything. And what really gets to me is that people are dumb enough to believe all of this. I have numerous friends on my Facebook friend list that are sharing these articles like the emperor is wearing no clothing or something. They post comments as if they are admiring the beadwork and feathers on her immaculate garment, while she stands naked. It makes me sick, but I don't have anything else to say about it besides that. Though, really, if things go like they always have gone in the past, the second I start doing or saying something and a few people pay attention, eventually they'll end up saying what I have been saying by the time I move on to something else. Lots of people feel the way I feel, I suppose. That's all I have to say for this video. If this was at all satisfying to you, please consider donating to me on PayPal or Patreon, links in the description, and stay tuned.